What is up, dudes and lady dudes? Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, I've got a new discussion video talking about the new card, Fusion Dispatch. It's a new spell card that's really interesting coming out of Eternity Code. It lets you special summon fusion materials straight out of the deck that are listed on a fusion monster in your extra deck, and then it locks you into fusion monsters for the rest of the turn. Super interesting, pretty generically good in most decks that can use fusion that just like are kind of fusion based. And so I want to do a discussion video because on the surface it may seem that a lot of decks can make use of this, but once you dive a little deeper, you really trim the fat in how many decks like don't actually work with this. And so you find the ones that actually do. And I actually came up with like a list here that I want to discuss of a lot of decks that kind of got pushed to the side because they don't really want to make use of this card, and then some decks that actually can make some interesting use of this card and get a decent buff with this card as well. So we'll get into that in just a second. One more thing is we got face cam. I got a face cam back up. I got a new one for Christmas from my lovely girlfriend. She's the best. This one's better than the other one. And before I was having trouble figuring out issues with syncing audio and the face cam together because I use the audio from a mic and all this whatever technical stuff. Whatever. It's nice to see here, and I hope I can keep this here to stay for a little bit. Not a little bit, but like for the future. And yeah, hopefully it'll be a normal thing on here. Also, my room is not that messy. In the face cam, it looks kind of messy. It's not that messy, I'm telling you. I just have a small room and a lot of things in it. So even if it kind of looks messy because of how the face cam is designed or whatever, it's just a lot of stuff. Even if it was like immaculately clean and put like perfectly away, it still would look like kind of not that great. And just a little like jumbled. So whatever, don't worry about it. I think it's interesting to look at. Whatever. Okay, we're moving on. So let's get into some interesting things. Let's talk about this card. So when I was trimming the fat with this card and what decks really don't work with it that great, there's like three categories that I kind of ran into as like why they don't work. So the first category is stuff that's like deceptively not that great with it that you thought. That stipulation is a killer to them. So some of those decks are like Cyber Dragons, Blue Eyes, Red Eyes, ABCs, Prank Kids, Gem Knights, Glad Beasts, all deck that use fusions that can have good targets for this, but the problem is that stipulation is too much. Glad Beasts. The Glad Beasts all revolve around Test Panther now. Gem Knights, they kind of revolve around Gem Knight Phantom Core. Prank Kids, they have to go into their links. They just have to, otherwise their plays do nothing. You need to make use of Dodo Doodle Doo. ABCs. This is one that like may be able to survive it, but you're just like lowering the ceiling of your deck significantly. You can't end on any XZs. You can't even go. You can't go into Platinum Gadget or Cleave Genius as like extenders, or just like making your board making better use of your ABC pieces on board before making ABC Buster. Red Eyes and Blue Eyes kind of just want to use like Guard Dragon plays at this point and like make rank 8s and 7s. So like those definitely you lose like a lot of what the best cards in their extra deck are, which are like the Guard Dragons. And then Cyber Dragon, they just want to use Lynx and Xyz as well. So like all of those decks just really can't like survive that. And so because of that, I kind of just tossed them all out. Next up, there's a bunch of different decks that can't do it because their materials for their stuff is just not generic. Or they are generic. That's what I meant. My bad. Their materials for the fusion monsters are generic, and it's too generic to use. The two biggest ones are like Ritual Beasts, which this card could have been really interesting because you can get by without making the link by just making like Kanahawk and just plussing a bunch, especially in Master Rule 4 or the new Master Rule 5, and then Shadalls. And that's the other one because like their fusions are completely generic, not completely, but like a Shadal monster in any attribute. So they just don't work. They don't even have targets they can summon. Neither of them do. And so they can't even work with this card at all. Whereas otherwise they might be pretty good strategies with it. And then the last ones are ones that are just too bad. Like they're just decks that are just too awful that like even with this card, and even if this card is good for them, like good for you, it really isn't great overall. And so those are like Ojama, Cyberdark, Roid, Amazonas. These are decks that are fusion based. Really don't care about the stipulation that much. But they're just like too awful that while this card is like good for them, it really doesn't move them into any kind of interesting category, right? So once we trim all the fat off of all of those decks, we're left with six things that are interesting. We've got 3 that are legitimately interesting right out the gate, and we have 3 that could be interesting, but I'm not entirely sure yet. I'm on the fence on them about it. I think they could have some potential with this card, but like we'll have to see, right? So let's move into it. Right here, we'll start with Heroes. Okay, so the first one is Heroes. This is a really tough one for me because Konami has learned that super specific fusions don't do well in Yu-Gi-Oh! And so what they did is they started making pretty much every single hero fusion generic. They take any 2 hero monsters, a hero and any attribute in the game, and then eventually they're just like, they don't even have actual monsters listed on them anymore. And so really the only hero monsters you can take advantage of this with are like a couple of the evil heroes, a couple of the Destiny heroes, and I don't even think you can do it with Vision heroes. And then it's just the old elemental heroes. And so those are the worst, like, not the, well, I guess the worst heroes. They're like the vanillas and stuff. It's just not good. There's no hero fusion that lists Stratos on it as materials, or Liquid Man, the new one. Like, just the good ones. And you could go through more, but like, they just don't have the good ones. Vision Hero Forest, that's not on there, but that would be cool if it was. And so overall, it's just not enough. And so I think it's just not great right now, but all it takes is one fusion that says Stratos on it, and this card becomes immediately interesting because the links are not absolutely necessary. They're nice, but you can make do without them in this deck if you have the right extenders. So I thought this was interesting just because they have so much support at this point. So we'll have to see, but I think this one will probably miss out on being good. Next up is Invoked. Now this is one that I think misses for the most part, but I think it could have some ways to make use. I don't know. The problem is Alistair only gets to search Invocation if he is normal summoned, not when he's special summoned. So if you special him out of the deck, he does not search you Invocation, in which case this card would be amazing if that was the case, but it's not. And so it's like iffy because like what does this do for you if it's not searching Invocation? You're not even able to make your fusions, which is the whole thing. So this is only really good if you opened Invocation as well. And yeah, so it's like meh. That's all it is, just meh. Other than that, this deck like can totally work around the stipulation. This deck, it'd be a nice turbo consistency card, especially in like a pure version. But I think overall it's gonna miss out for now. But all it takes is like any card, like one card that says like I don't even know what it would be, but like one card that can kind of pull this archetype together. But I thought this one was more interesting than the others overall. And then this card. This one card is super interesting to me. For weird reasons, but it could be. So this is Sandwich. This card's just a vanilla fusion, but it takes a Sangan and a Witch of the Black Forest. Both very interesting cards. Mostly. They have to work in very specific archetypes, but if they do, you could be looking at something really interesting. And so one of the decks that I'm actually very much into is Lair of Darkness. It's one of my staple decks on my channel that I like talk about more often than other decks. But with Lair of Darkness, Sangan's super interesting because Lilith is one of your main cards, as well as, well, let's just say with Lilith. Let's stick to Lilith for right now. If you don't know what Lilith does, it tributes a monster on your field, tributes a dark monster, to add pretty much any normal trap from deck to hand. That's simplifying it, but that's pretty much what it does. So, what you could do is you could use this as special Sangan straight from the deck. Normal Lilith, tribute the Sangan to search a trap, and Sangan will also search you either a hand trap or a follow-up play and maybe a tour guide, and just set you up with either follow play or extra disruption, while you also got a normal trap, which is probably going to be disruption as well, which is really, really solid. And I think that's one of the interesting things. Obviously, kind of like with the Invoked thing, you do kind of like have to open Sangan with a copy of Lilith, otherwise you're probably not going to be too happy with your situation. But I think overall, I think it could have some implications there. The deck doesn't even go into the extra deck turn one, like rarely ever. So that's not a problem at all, like worrying about that. And it is just a free special of a Sangan. So a card that might already just be playable in the deck. So I don't know. I think it was interesting. Witch of the Black Forest could come up too, but like I just don't think it has like specific synergy with like a deck that really wants to make use of it. It can get it in the graveyard. Like Lair can tribute its own monsters, so you can get it in the grave without link summoning, because that'd be the main way you'd want to go in, like get it off the field, but you just can't. And so without that, it's like tough. But I think this might be interesting nonetheless. Down the road, we'll have to see. Then we move to the real stuff. So first up is Dark Magician. Now this, you may say, John, that's not real. That's not a competitive deck. And I think I agree with you for the most part, but something that is interesting is that Dark Magician is getting a legit support in the next Legendary Duelist. They're getting like five cards, 6 new cards? 5 or 6? I think it's 6. And I think like 4 of them are like legitimately pretty solid. 2 of them are like particularly really good. Plus, we don't know when we're getting it, but at some point we're going to get the Dragoon of Red Eyes, which is definitely a huge buff to this deck specifically, in which case this deck will see even more of a power bump. But what's interesting here is that this can just special summon Dark Magician straight from the deck. So much, like, the only way Dark Magician ever just loses, just downright loses, is if you cannot connect a Dark Magician. If you open a bunch of cards that kind of work if you have a Dark Magician, but you don't get one. And there's stuff like the new spell card's amazing if you have Dark Magician on field or in grave. There's stuff like, I don't know, just a ton of like Eternal Soul, special summons Dark Magician, I think from hand or grave. Like, that only works if you have Dark Magician. There's just a ton of cards like that. This just turbos him out, which is super, super nice. It locks you into fusions, but this deck is not really precedent on making XZs. Like, rank 7s are actually not that good in Yu-Gi-Oh! And other stuff. So I really think Dark Magician can really make use of this card, potentially. And maybe this could be just another consistency card for them, just getting their Dark Magician out. And if they play Dark Magician Girl, you could special summon her too, just by playing one more card in your extra deck. Which is not that bad, because this deck I don't think is that tight on extra deck space. But yeah, I do think it is playable in Dark Magician. I do think they'll be interesting. Next up is Fluffles. This is a deck that gets a huge buff in Master Rules 5. That's a huge part of why this is on here, that it's already getting such a huge buff. It didn't even have Fright for Patchwork in Master Rule 5, or in Master Rule 3 before Master Rule 4. And so we never saw it at like full power even then. And now we have it in here, so that's already not only a buff as far as Master Rule 5, but also getting that new card that's just a free +1 that's so good. And now we have a turbo card. The only thing this card really locks you out of is Crochet Sheep, or Claw Thief, whatever you want to call it, coming out in Ignition Assault, a good link monster. But I don't think they need that. I think it's just a nice card that gets them extra resources. I think it can totally function without it, and with just fusions, because they just spam so many to the board and they just kill you. That's all they do. And so I think this deck is actually really interesting like that. It kind of has the same thing with Madolches, where if it's forced to go first, the deck may potentially not be able to do anything but put some bodies on board. And if you just out those bodies, you probably just lose. But it's still an interesting deck nonetheless. And I really wanted to keep it in here because I do think it does become interesting with this card. And then there's one final deck that really is like, come on, man. And that's it right there. Thunder Dragons. Why? Thunder Dragons, like, people are always already saying that, like, once Master Rule 5 comes around, Thunder Dragons will move into, like, best deck status if they're not touched on the ban list. So let's give them another card that can just turbo Thunder Dragon straight out of the deck. Great. Cool. Sounds good to me. Woo! So, I don't know. It's fine, I guess. It just makes them even better. It just helps to turbo it out. Obviously, if you put Colossus to 1, that'll severely hurt what they're able to do. But with this card and this overall with like what kind of board they're able to set up, but I think this deck probably benefits the most, or is the most, at least definitely the most competitively relevant that can possibly make use of this card. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's going to allow it's just going to give them an extra special. Could end them on an extra Colossus, could end them on an extra Titan, whatever. It's good. It's good. That's what's important. All right. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I think this card seemed super generically great at the beginning, but really there's only a couple like decks it really is useful in. So I want to do the work. I want to go through and I want to see pretty much everything and how everything kind of works with it. And this is what I found. So hopefully this kind of enlightened you on this card on what can really make good use out of it, and hopefully shows you the light there. Other than that, guys, let me know if I missed anything. Obviously, it's totally possible. I went through almost 350 different fusion monsters and looking at what this card can work with. So let me know if I missed anything, because I easily could have just missed something that's actually interesting there. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. As always, subscribe to the channel if you have not yet. And I think I'll just see you in the next video. If that's cool. If that's cool with you. I'm out of here. Peace. I love you.